Arun walked carefully across the wide roots that rose from the ground like bridges. The forest around him was unlike anything he had seen before. The air shimmered with green light, as if the leaves themselves carried hidden fire. Strange insects hummed above his head, their wings glowing like tiny lanterns. Every sound in this place felt alive, every shadow whispered of mysteries. Arun's team had sent him to collect samples from the forest, but now he realized how dangerous this alien world truly was. As he moved forward, he noticed a narrow path of crystal vines stretching over a deep chasm. The vines sparkled as if made of glass, and below them, the abyss seemed endless. Arun hesitated, knowing one wrong step could send him falling into the unknown. Yet something on the other side caught his eye. A figure stood there, small and still. It was not one of his crew. It was a girl, dressed in flowing silver robes, her skin faintly glowing in the dim light. She looked fragile, yet her eyes were sharp and curious. For a moment, Arun wondered if she was only an illusion, a trick of this strange planet. But then, the girl stepped onto the crystal vines. Arun's heart raced. The vines shook under her weight. She moved with grace, yet the bridge trembled dangerously. Arun shouted, his voice echoing across the chasm, "Wait, it is not safe." The girl turned her head, her silver eyes widening as she finally noticed him. But before either of them could react, one of the vines cracked. The sound was sharp, like breaking glass. The girl screamed as the bridge tilted. She lost her balance and slipped forward, her arms flailing in the air. Without thinking, Arun leapt across the remaining roots and threw himself toward the vines. His boots slid, his hands burned as he grabbed the sharp crystal surface, but he pushed forward. He reached her just as she was falling, catching her arm tightly. For a tense moment, they both dangled above the abyss. Arun pulled with all his strength, his muscles aching. The girl gasped, her hand gripping his as though her life depended on it, which it did. Inch by inch, he dragged her back onto the root. Finally, they collapsed together, breathing heavily, safe from the fall. The girl stared at him, her face pale, her chest rising and falling quickly. Then, without saying a word, she took his hand again, holding it tightly. Arun looked at her in surprise. He expected her to let go once she was safe, but she refused. Her fingers wrapped around his as if she feared he might disappear if she released him. "Are you hurt?" Arun asked softly. The girl shook her head, her silver hair brushing against her cheeks. She studied him with an expression he could not read. There was both fear and wonder in her gaze. She did not answer his question, but her grip only grew stronger. Arun did not pull away. Before he could ask more, heavy footsteps echoed through the forest. Figures emerged from the shadows, tall and armored in shining metal. Their helmets reflected the green light of the forest, and their weapons hummed with strange energy. Arun froze, realizing he had stumbled into something far greater than a simple rescue. The soldiers surrounded them in a circle. Their leader spoke in a language Arun did not understand, but the girl quickly raised her voice, sharp and commanding. The soldiers hesitated. Then, to Arun's surprise, they lowered their weapons slightly and bowed their heads to her. Arun realized then that the girl was no ordinary traveler. She was someone important, someone powerful. He looked at her again, and she finally spoke in broken but clear words, "You saved me." Arun nodded, unsure what else to say. Before he could reply, the soldiers lifted their weapons again, not toward her, but toward him. The leader gestured sharply, and two of them stepped forward. They grabbed Arun by the arms, their grip like iron. "Wait," Arun said quickly, "I did not mean harm. I was only trying to help." The girl stood up, still holding his hand, refusing to let go even as the guards tried to separate them. She shouted something at the soldiers, her voice filled with authority. They froze once more, looking between her and Arun with clear uncertainty. A deep voice cut through the silence. It came from behind the guards, strong and filled with power. The soldiers parted at once, lowering their heads. From the shadows stepped a tall figure clad in flowing royal armor. Her crown gleamed with emerald light, her eyes sharp and glowing like stars. She radiated command with every step. Arun felt the weight of her gaze immediately. She was no soldier. She was no ordinary leader. She was the queen. The queen stopped before them, her tall figure towering over both Arun and the girl. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the human holding her daughter's hand. The forest seemed to grow silent, as if waiting for her judgment. Finally, her voice rang out, firm and demanding, "Why is my daughter holding your hand, human?" Arun could not answer at once. He stood frozen under her glare, realizing that his life had just changed forever. Arun stood frozen, caught under the sharp gaze of the alien queen. Her voice still echoed in the air, heavy with authority. The soldiers around him kept their weapons raised, waiting for her command. The girl beside him, still holding his hand tightly, looked up at her mother with pleading eyes. Arun's heart raced. He had only tried to help, but now he felt like a prisoner standing before a ruler who could end his life with a single order. "I only helped her," Arun said quickly, his voice steady though fear pressed against his chest. "She was falling. I pulled her back. That is all." The queen's eyes narrowed further. She did not look convinced. The court of soldiers whispered among themselves in their strange language, the sound harsh and cold. Arun could not understand their words, but he felt their suspicion. The girl suddenly stepped forward. Her silver robe shimmered in the green light as she raised her chin with courage. "Mother," she said firmly in her own tongue, though her eyes flicked back to Arun as if to reassure him. She spoke quickly, her words sharp and strong. Though Arun did not know the meaning, he could hear her tone filled with truth and defense. The queen's gaze softened for a brief second, but it quickly hardened again. She studied Arun from head to toe, her expression unreadable. Then she gave a single command to the guards. 2 soldiers stepped forward, their heavy boots striking the ground as they moved. They released Arun's arms, no longer holding him with such force, but their eyes never left him. The queen gestured to the grand palace towers that rose in the distance, their crystal walls shining like suns. "He will come with us," the queen declared. Arun did not resist as the soldiers surrounded him. The girl still held his hand as if she refused to be separated, and though the queen frowned at the sight, she did not force them apart. Together, they walked through the forest path that led to the royal palace. The palace gates were tall and wide, guarded by even more soldiers. As Arun entered, he felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. Courtiers, nobles, and attendants lined the halls, whispering about the human stranger walking beside the princess. Their eyes carried doubt, curiosity, and in some cases, clear dislike. Arun's steps echoed in the marble floor as he followed the queen toward the throne chamber. Inside the great hall, the queen took her seat upon a high throne carved from black stone, glowing with silver lines that pulsed like veins of light. The girl, whom Arun now knew was the princess, stood beside him, still refusing to release his hand. The courtiers surrounded them, their voices rising in confusion. "Why is he here?" one demanded. "A human?" In the palace, another whispered loudly. The queen raised her hand, and the voices fell silent. Her gaze rested on Arun, sharp as a blade. "You will remain here," she said in a cold voice. "Until I decide what must be done." Arun swallowed hard. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but he also knew his words might only anger her further. Instead, he nodded respectfully. "I understand." The queen tilted her head slightly, as though studying him for weakness. Then she turned to her daughter. "Lyra, explain why you defend him so strongly." So the princess's name was Lyra. She lifted her chin, her voice clear and proud. "Because he saved me." He risked his life for mine. If not for him, I would have fallen. The courtiers whispered again, though softer this time. Some seemed surprised. Others looked unconvinced. The queen's expression did not change. She stared at her daughter for a long moment, then turned back to Arun. Your kind is not trusted here, she said firmly. Humans wander the stars, yet they are reckless, selfish, and weak. Why should I believe you are different? Arun's heart pounded. He knew every word he spoke mattered. He chose his voice carefully, speaking with calm honesty. I do not know what you believe about my people. I only know what I did. I saw someone in danger, and I could not stand still. That is all. That is who I am. For the first time, silence filled the hall without whispers. Even the courtiers looked at him with curiosity, some tilting their heads as though reconsidering their judgment. The queen leaned back in her throne, her glowing eyes fixed on Arun. You speak with boldness, she said slowly. Perhaps too much boldness. She paused, then gave her order. You will stay in the palace. You will be watched. Do not think yourself free. Until I decide your fate, you belong under my roof. The soldiers moved again, but Lyra stepped in front of Arun quickly. He is no prisoner. If you keep him here, he must be treated with honor. The queen's eyes narrowed at her daughter's defiance. For a moment, Arun thought she might strike down his only protector. But instead, the queen raised her hand, silencing the guards once more. Very well, the queen said at last. Let the human stay. But remember this, daughter. If his steps bring harm, it will be on you as well. Lyra bowed her head slightly, though her hands still tightened around Arun's. Arun felt the tension in the room settle for now, though the eyes of the court still burned against his back. He realized he was trapped in a place filled with suspicion and power, with only the princess as his shield. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was clear. His life was now bound to the fate of the alien princess, and every choice he made would shape how the queen judged not only him, but all of humanity. The days in the alien palace moved slowly for Arun. He was not kept in a prison cell, yet he knew he was not free either. Soldiers followed his every step, their eyes sharp and suspicious. He was given a chamber high within the crystal towers, with walls that shone like mirrors and windows that opened to the endless alien forest below. It was a beautiful place, but Arun felt the weight of unseen chains every time he looked at the guards standing outside his door. Still, there was one light in the strange silence of his new life. Princess Lyra often came to visit him. At first, the guards tried to stop her, but she only raised her chin and commanded them to step aside. Nobody dared defy the daughter of the queen. She would walk into Arun's chamber with a curious smile, bringing trays of food or scrolls filled with alien symbols. Arun learned quickly that Lyra was unlike the courtiers and nobles who glared at him from a distance. She was curious, eager to know more about everything. She asked endless questions about Earth, about humans, about the way people lived their lives beyond the stars. Her eyes sparkled whenever Arun described things that seemed ordinary to him but strange to her, like children flying kites in the wind, families gathering around a fire, or music filling the night sky during festivals. And on your world, she asked one evening as they sat by the balcony, people do not need glowing crystals to light the halls. Arun laughed softly. No. We use electricity. It is not as beautiful as this, but it works. Lyra leaned closer, fascinated. Electricity. I want to see it one day. Arun watched her face as she spoke. She was gentle and curious, but there was also a fire in her spirit, the kind that came from being raised as royalty. He could not forget that she was the queen's daughter, and the danger of being too close to her pressed against his thoughts. Yet, whenever she was near, that danger seemed far away. The bond between them grew, though neither spoke of it aloud. Arun found himself looking forward to her visits, and she always seemed to find reasons to spend time with him. Sometimes they walked in the palace gardens, where tall flowers glowed under the night sky like lanterns. Other times they sat near the fountains, watching water rise and fall in strange patterns shaped by alien technology. But their closeness did not go unnoticed. Whispers began to spread among the nobles. Some sneered when they passed, others turned their heads sharply, pretending not to see but speaking in hushed tones afterward. Arun could feel the coldness in their stares. Even the soldiers guarding the halls grew restless, their hands tightening on their weapons whenever Lyra lingered too long beside him. One evening, as Arun returned from the gardens, he overheard two courtiers speaking in the corridor. Their voices were low, but the words were clear. "The queen cannot allow this," one said. "The princess must not be seen holding the hand of a human." "The girl is young and foolish," the other whispered. "But if the queen does not act soon, the court will question her judgment." Arun's stomach tightened. He walked past them without a word, but their whispers followed him like shadows. Later that night, as he sat alone in his chamber, Lyra came to visit again. She carried a small crystal orb in her hands, glowing softly like a star. She placed it on the table before him. "This orb remembers voices," she explained. "It is used to keep stories. I want you to tell me a story from your world." Arun hesitated. "Why are you so interested in humans, Lyra? I am only one man, and I am not important." Her eyes met his, steady and sincere. "Because you are different. You act without asking for reward. You saved me when no one else would. And when you speak of your world, it feels alive. I want to understand." Her words touched something deep in him. He told her a story from his childhood, about running across fields with his friends, chasing the wind while the sun painted the sky gold. Lyra listened with quiet wonder, and when he finished, she placed her hand over his. "You make me believe humans are not as weak as many here think," she whispered. The moment felt fragile, like glass that could break with the smallest sound. Arun wanted to speak, but before he could, a sharp voice echoed from the doorway. "Enough." They both turned. A tall figure stood there, dressed in dark robes, eyes filled with suspicion. It was one of the queen's advisors, a man whose loyalty to the throne was known by all. "You grow careless, princess," he said coldly. "The court speaks of your visits. Do you wish to bring shame upon your mother?" Lyra's face hardened, but her hand did not leave Arun's. "I decide where I walk and whom I speak to," she answered firmly. The advisor's eyes flicked to Arun with clear hatred. "Then remember this. Every step the human takes is watched. Every word he speaks is judged. One mistake, and he will not leave this palace alive." With that warning, the advisor turned and left. The chamber grew silent once more. Arun looked at Lyra, his heart heavy. He knew their bond was dangerous, not only for him but for her as well. Yet when she squeezed his hand, refusing to let go, he also knew that no warning could erase the connection that had already begun to grow between them. The morning sun rose over the crystal towers, painting the palace in shades of silver and gold. Arun stood in the great hall once more, facing the queen. Her throne glowed with power, her figure sharp and regal, while the courtiers whispered from the shadows. The air was thick with tension. The queen's eyes fixed on him. "You claim you saved my daughter out of simple kindness," she said, her voice calm but heavy. "But words are nothing without proof. If you wish to remain under this roof, you must show me your worth." Arun kept his head low, though his voice was steady. "What must I do?" The queen raised her hand. The hall grew silent. "You will face the trial of trust," she declared. "A path meant to test strength, courage, and truth. Fail, and you will never stand in this palace again. Succeed, and you will earn the right to walk these halls without chains of suspicion." Lyra gasped, stepping forward. "Mother, The trial is for warriors, not for a guest. The queen silenced her with a single glance. If the human is as honorable as you believe, let him prove it. Arun met Lyra's worried eyes and gave a small nod. He did not know what awaited him, but he understood that refusing would only make him look weak. The decision had already been made. That afternoon, the guards led him to a vast chamber beneath the palace. The walls glowed faintly with crystal veins, casting eerie light across the floor. Strange carvings covered the stones, showing beasts with many heads and warriors locked in battle. The air was cool, yet it carried the weight of countless trials from ages past. The queen watched from a high balcony, her court gathered beside her. Lyra stood close to the railing, her hands gripping it tightly as her eyes followed Arun. The gate before him opened with a deep groan, and the trial began. The first test was a puzzle of shifting platforms. Large stones floated in the air, moving slowly above a pool of glowing liquid. Arun realized he had to cross them, but each step threatened to send him falling into the dangerous light below. He steadied his breathing and leapt from one platform to another. His boots slipped, his arms swung for balance, but he did not fall. He studied the rhythm of the stones, waiting for the right moment to jump. Slowly, carefully, he reached the other side. The second test was a battle against a creature. From the shadows crept a beast with scales like armor and eyes burning red. Its claws scraped against the floor, sparks flying with each step. Arun had no weapon but a simple staff given by the guards. The beast roared, charging toward him with terrifying speed. Arun held his ground. He sidestepped at the last moment, striking its side with the staff. The blow was weak, but it bought him time. The creature turned, its tail lashing out. The force knocked him to the ground, his staff nearly slipping from his hands. Pain shot through his arm, but he forced himself to rise. He studied the beast, noticing its movements. Every time it roared, it lowered its head for a brief moment. Arun waited, heart pounding, then struck with all his strength when the chance came. His staff hit the beast's jaw, stunning it. With a final desperate strike, he pushed it back into the glowing pool. The creature let out one last roar before sinking beneath the light. The court above erupted in whispers. Arun stood breathing hard, his body trembling with exhaustion, but he did not give up. The final test was not of strength but of choice. A wall split open to reveal two paths. On one side lay a crystal crown, glowing with power. On the other stood a wounded soldier, trapped beneath heavy stone. Arun looked up, confused, but the queen's voice echoed from above. Choose. Will you take the crown and claim victory, or will you risk failure to save another? Arun stared at the crown. It was beautiful, tempting, the sign of triumph. Yet when he heard the faint groan of the soldier, he knew his answer. He dropped his staff and ran to the trapped man. With every bit of strength left in him, he pushed against the heavy stone. His muscles burned, his back screamed in pain, but slowly the rock shifted. At last, the soldier crawled free, alive though weak. Arun leaned against the wall, breathless. He had no crown, no treasure, only bruises and exhaustion. The queen rose from her throne, her eyes unblinking as she studied him. The hall was silent, waiting for her judgment. Finally, she spoke. You had the chance to claim victory for yourself, she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. Yet you chose to lift another instead. That is not weakness. That is strength. Lyra's face lit with relief, her hands clapping softly against the railing. The courtiers looked at one another in surprise. The queen raised her hand once more. The human has passed, she declared. He may remain in this palace as a guest, not a prisoner. But remember, his steps are still watched. The soldiers led Arun out of the chamber, but this time their grip was not as harsh. As he walked past, he caught Lyra's eyes. She smiled warmly, her expression filled with pride. Arun did not know if he had truly earned the queen's trust, but he had proven something. He was not weak, and he was not a liar. In that moment, he understood that his place in this palace was no longer by accident. His path was now tied to theirs, and the bond he shared with the princess grew stronger than ever. The palace was quieter than usual that night. The glowing crystals along the walls flickered softly, and the great halls echoed only with the sound of distant footsteps. Arun sat on the balcony of his chamber, staring at the alien sky above. The stars seemed closer here, shining in patterns he did not recognize. For the first time since his arrival, he allowed himself to breathe freely. He had faced the trial, he had survived, and though the queen's eyes were still sharp, she no longer treated him as an enemy. Yet, peace did not last long. As Arun leaned on the railing, he noticed movement in the gardens below. Shadows crept between the glowing flowers, shapes that did not belong to the palace guards. His eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, trying to see clearly. The shadows moved quickly, too organized to be wild creatures. He heard the faint clatter of metal, the quiet hum of weapons. Arun's chest tightened. Something was wrong. He rushed from the balcony and down the hall. Two guards stood outside his chamber, but before he could speak, the air was split by a sudden cry. A sharp blast of energy struck the walls, shaking the entire tower. The guards raised their weapons, shouting in alarm. Arun's heart pounded. The palace was under attack. The sounds of battle echoed through the corridors. Soldiers shouted, crystal blades clashed, and the hum of alien weapons filled the night. Arun moved with the guards, but his thoughts were not on his own safety. His mind turned to one person, Lyra. He raced toward the central hall. Smoke filled the air, and fragments of crystal rained from the ceiling. The once bright corridors were now filled with chaos. Through the haze, Arun saw figures dressed in dark armor. Their movements were swift and ruthless, cutting down palace defenders with deadly precision. These were no ordinary raiders. They were warriors from a rival faction, and their target was clear: the princess. Arun spotted Lyra near the throne room entrance. She was surrounded by her mother's guards, her silver robe flowing as she tried to remain calm. The queen stood tall at her throne, her voice echoing commands to her soldiers. But the enemy forces pressed harder, their numbers overwhelming. Without thinking, Arun pushed through the smoke, reaching Lyra's side. She looked at him with wide eyes, her voice filled with urgency. They came for me. We must move. The guards hesitated. Some wanted to stay and fight, others looked to the queen for orders. But Arun knew hesitation could cost them dearly. He grabbed Lyra's hand firmly. Come with me. I know another way. Lyra did not resist. She trusted him without question. Together they ran through the side corridors, away from the throne room where the battle grew louder. Arun remembered the hidden passages he had explored during the trial. They were narrow and dark, but they could lead them safely out of danger. The halls shook as explosions echoed behind them. Arun guided Lyra through winding paths, past walls that glowed faintly with shifting symbols. Each step carried the weight of urgency. Behind them, shouts rang out as enemy soldiers gave chase. They reached a hidden stairway carved into the stone. Arun pushed Lyra forward first, climbing quickly after her. The passage was steep, but it led upward, away from the chaos below. His body ached from the wounds of the trial, yet he forced himself onward. There was no room for weakness now. At last they reached an exit that opened into the outer gardens. The night air was sharp, filled with the distant sound of battle. The gardens glowed faintly, the flowers trembling as the ground shook with blasts. Arun scanned the area. Enemy soldiers were spreading across the palace grounds, but the path ahead was not yet blocked. Lyra's breath came quick, but her voice was steady. Where do we go now? Arun pointed toward the forest beyond the palace walls. If we reach the trees, we can hide until the Queen's forces push them back. Together they ran. The soft glow of the garden lit their path, but danger closed in quickly. Enemy soldiers spotted them and gave chase, their footsteps heavy and relentless. Energy bolts struck the ground near their feet, sending sparks into the air. Arun pulled Lyra behind a stone wall for cover. His heart raced, his mind desperate for a plan. He picked up a fallen weapon from one of the guards, a long crystal blade that shimmered with alien light. Its weight was unfamiliar, but his grip was firm. When the enemies drew close, Arun struck. He moved clumsily compared to trained soldiers, yet his determination gave him strength. He swung the blade with all his might, blocking attacks and forcing the enemies back. Lyra, though unarmed, did not cower. She shouted warnings, guiding him as more soldiers tried to surround them. At last, Arun struck down the final soldier in their path. His chest heaved, his arms burned, but he did not falter. He grabbed Lyra's hand once more, and together they pushed forward into the forest. The trees swallowed them in shadows, their glowing leaves casting strange light on the ground. They moved deeper, guided only by instinct. Behind them, the palace burned with fire and light, the battle still raging. When they finally stopped to rest beneath the towering roots of an ancient tree, Lyra turned to him, her face pale but her eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved me again," she whispered. "I thought I would be taken tonight." Arun shook his head, his voice quiet but firm. "I could not let that happen. Not to you." Lyra looked at him for a long moment, then placed her hand over his. The bond between them had grown stronger in the fire of danger, a bond that no whispers or warnings could break. Far behind them, the Queen's forces continued their desperate battle, but Arun and Lyra had survived. And for the first time, Arun felt the truth settle in his heart: humanity was not weak in the eyes of this world. He had shown that when danger struck, humans did not run. They stood, they fought, and they protected. The forest was alive with strange sounds as Arun and Lyra hid beneath the giant tree. The glowing leaves above swayed in the wind, casting shifting shadows across their faces. Arun's chest still burned from the fight, but he forced himself to stay alert. Every rustle in the branches made him tighten his grip on the crystal blade. The palace behind them still echoed with distant blasts, and he knew the enemy would not stop searching until they found Lyra. Lyra sat beside him, her silver robe torn from their escape, her breathing uneven. Yet her spirit remained strong. She looked at Arun with steady eyes, refusing to let fear show. "We cannot stay here for long," she said softly. "They will find us if we do." Arun nodded. "We need to get a signal out. The Queen's loyal soldiers must know where you are." He looked around, searching for anything that could help. The forest was vast, filled with glowing plants and strange vines that hummed when touched. Arun noticed a cluster of crystal flowers rising from the ground. They pulsed with faint light, almost like living beacons. An idea came to him. "If we break these in a pattern, the light might spread. Your people might see it," he said. Lyra's eyes brightened with hope. "Yes, the crystal blooms connect with the energy veins of the forest. If we strike them in the right sequence, the signal will travel." Together, they worked quickly. Arun struck the flowers with the blade while Lyra guided him with knowledge of the patterns. The light spread from bloom to bloom, racing through the forest like fire along dry grass. Soon, the night sky above lit with waves of green and silver, a clear call for help. But the signal also drew attention. From the distance came shouts, the voices of enemy soldiers. Their footsteps grew louder, closing in from every side. Arun tightened his grip on the blade, standing protectively before Lyra. "They are coming," he said. Lyra rose beside him, her chin high. Though she had no weapon, her courage did not falter. "Then we fight together." The enemy burst into the clearing, their armor dark and sharp. They moved swiftly, weapons glowing as they surrounded the two. Arun stepped forward, his stance ready, though his body ached from exhaustion. He blocked the first strike, sparks flying as crystal clashed against crystal. His arms trembled, but he refused to fall. The soldiers pressed harder. Arun fought with every ounce of strength left in him, his blade moving with raw determination. One soldier lunged too close, and Arun countered with a heavy strike that sent the enemy sprawling. Another came from behind, but Lyra shouted a warning, giving Arun the split second he needed to turn and block. It seemed hopeless. The enemy was too many, and Arun's body screamed in pain. Just as his knees threatened to buckle, a horn echoed through the forest. Bright light cut through the shadows as armored figures charged into the clearing. It was the Queen's loyal soldiers. Reinforcements had arrived. The attackers faltered as the Queen's forces struck them with precision and strength. The battle was fierce but swift. One by one, the rival soldiers fell or fled into the darkness. The clearing filled with the sound of clashing steel, then silence. Arun lowered his blade, his breath ragged. He could hardly stand, yet he stayed on his feet, refusing to collapse until he knew Lyra was safe. She moved to his side, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You did it," she whispered. "You kept me safe until they came." The soldiers who rescued them bowed before Lyra, addressing her with respect. They led both her and Arun back through the forest, guiding them toward the palace. When they returned, the palace was scarred but still standing. Smoke drifted through the halls, and broken crystal littered the floor, but the queen remained on her throne. She had not abandoned her people. Her glowing eyes turned sharp as she saw Arun and Lyra enter together. Arun expected her anger. He expected her to accuse him of dragging her daughter into danger. But instead, the queen's gaze rested on the cut across his arm, the dirt upon his face, and the way he stood protectively in front of Lyra even now. "You risked everything," the queen said slowly. Her voice was softer than before, though still heavy with power. "You could have fled. You could have left her to her guards. But you did not." Arun bowed his head, his voice steady. "I could not. She needed me. That was enough." The hall grew silent. Even the courtiers who once whispered with suspicion stared at him with new eyes. His words carried no pride, only truth, and it struck deeper than any argument could. The queen studied him for a long moment. At last, she spoke again. "Perhaps I was wrong to call your people weak. Perhaps humans are not as simple as I believed." Lyra stepped forward, her hand tightening around Arun's. "Mother, you see it now. He is different. He is not our enemy." The queen's gaze softened at her daughter's plea, though her expression remained stern. She nodded slowly. "The human has shown more courage than many warriors of this court. His actions cannot be ignored." Arun felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time, the queen's words did not carry only suspicion. They carried respect. That night, the palace began to rebuild. The flames were extinguished, the halls cleared of debris, and the survivors honored. Arun walked beside Lyra, her hand still holding his, their bond stronger than ever. He knew the queen had not fully accepted him yet, but a door had opened, and through it, a new path awaited. For Arun, it was no longer about proving himself only to the queen. It was about proving that humanity itself had a place in this vast galaxy, not as weak wanderers, but as protectors, allies, and friends. The palace stood tall once again, though its scars from the attack were still visible. Cracks in the crystal walls glowed faintly, and broken pillars had been replaced with hastily carved stone. Yet life moved forward. The people walked the halls with renewed courage, knowing their queen still ruled and her daughter had been saved. Arun moved carefully through the corridors, feeling both out of place and strangely connected. The alien courtiers looked at him differently now. Before, they had whispered that he was weak, a fragile creature not fit for their world. Now, their eyes carried respect, even curiosity. Some nodded as he passed, a silent sign that his actions during the attack had changed their hearts. Still, Arun knew the greatest challenge was not behind him. The queen had not yet spoken her final judgment about him. Her respect was a spark, but whether it would grow into true acceptance remained uncertain. He found Lyra in the garden that evening. The glowing trees swayed gently, their branches humming with a low and soothing song. She stood near the fountain, her silver hair catching the light of the crystals around them. When she saw Arun, her face lit with a smile. "You are healing well," she said, noticing the bandages on his arm. Arun gave a small laugh. "I have you to thank for that. And your people's strange medicine." She walked closer, her hand brushing against his. The simple touch sent warmth through him, and he realized how deeply their bond had grown. It was more than friendship. It was more than duty. Yet he knew speaking it aloud would not be simple, not in a palace ruled by a queen who had only just begun to see him in a new light. Before he could say more, a soldier entered the garden and bowed. "The queen summons both of you. It is time." The words struck Arun like a bell. He exchanged a glance with Lyra, who squeezed his hand gently. Together, they followed the soldier into the great throne room. The hall was filled with nobles, warriors, and scholars. The queen sat upon her shining throne, her presence powerful as ever. Her eyes glowed with wisdom and authority, scanning the crowd before settling on Arun and Lyra as they stepped forward. "People of the realm," the queen said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You have seen the dangers we faced. You have seen betrayal within our walls. And you have seen who stood against it." The hall grew quiet. All eyes were on her. The queen turned to Arun. "This human fought when he could have fled. He shielded my daughter when even my soldiers could not. He bled for her safety and for the safety of this palace." Whispers filled the hall, but they carried no doubt, only agreement. Arun bowed his head, not seeking glory. He only wanted to honor the truth. But the queen's gaze sharpened as if she could see the storm of thoughts within him. "Tell me, human," she said, her voice steady. "Why did you risk your life for my daughter? Was it duty? Was it pride? Or something more?" The hall waited in silence. Arun lifted his head and met her gaze. His heart pounded, but his voice was clear. "It was because she trusted me. From the moment we met, she saw something in me that no one else did. She believed I could stand beside her, even when I doubted myself. I could not betray that trust. I could not let her stand alone." The hall stirred with murmurs, but the queen remained quiet, studying his every word. Finally, she turned to Lyra. "And you, my daughter? Why do you hold his hand even now? Why do you look at him as if he is more than a stranger from another world?" Lyra's voice was steady. "Because he is not a stranger anymore. He is my ally, my protector, and my friend. And if you allow it, mother, he can be more than that. He can be someone who walks beside us, not as an outsider, but as one of us." The queen's eyes glowed brighter, and for a long moment, no one dared breathe. Then she rose from her throne. Her presence filled the hall like a wave of energy. She stepped down from the throne and approached the two standing in the center. She stopped before Arun, her gaze sharp yet softened by something new understanding. She raised her hand, not in anger, but in a gesture of recognition. "Very well," she declared. "The human has proven himself worthy. He is not weak, as I once thought. He is not a burden, as many believed. He is strong in ways that even we could not see. From this day forward, he will not be treated as an outsider. He has a place in this realm." The hall erupted with voices, some in surprise, others in approval. Arun felt his chest tighten with relief and gratitude. But the queen was not finished. She turned to her daughter and spoke with a mother's weight. "Lyra, if you choose to keep his hand in yours, I will not stand against it. But remember, this bond carries responsibility. He is human, and you are heir to the throne. Together, you must prove that such unity can be more than a story. You must prove it can shape the future. Lyra's eyes shone with emotion, and she bowed deeply. We will, mother. The queen looked once more at Arun, her glare no longer filled with suspicion but with challenge. Do not fail her. Do not fail me. Arun straightened, meeting her gaze with courage. I will not. The queen stepped back, and the hall thundered with applause. That night, the stars above the palace shone brighter than ever. Arun stood with Lyra on the balcony, looking at the endless sky. Their hands were joined, their paths bound together. The queen had given her decision, but Arun knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with unknown dangers and hidden wonders. But for the first time, he felt ready. For he was no longer just a human lost in an alien world. He was part of something greater. And with Lyra beside him, he would face whatever came next.